You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and I've got 3 stories for you today, centered around some workplace weirdness. We have a cheating scandal at a high school, a sheriff who couldn't keep his greedy paws off county funds, and a TV anchor with blood on her hands, literally. So let's get to it. First, a big thank you to Kirsten for her suggestion with our first story today. I would have never stumbled on this one on my own, and you know how I love to cover the lesser-known crimes. Now, Clinton High School in Clinton, Tennessee has a storied past. Back in 1956, 12 African-American students integrated into the previously all-white school. It wasn't a seamless transition. The reverse of segregation, forced by the Brown v. Board of Education ruling, spurred the 12 teens into enrolling in the school in the fall of '56. And the first day seemed to go okay. But by the second day, territorialism reared its ugly head, and a group of white adults who favored segregation showed up at Clinton High School to stop these 12 kids from attending. The leader of the group, who doesn't deserve to have his name said, well, he was a member of the KKK, and when they showed up on day 2, they screamed obscenities and threats at the 12 black students as those students tried to enter the school that morning for classes. Well, the law did get involved, and a judge ordered the protests at the school to stop, but they didn't. And that leader that I didn't name, well, they finally put him in jail. Now, you would think that might quell the protests, but it didn't. And a new leader stepped in, and the disruptions continued. Then cars were vandalized, and the school was vandalized, and windows were broken, and the violence became so worrisome that the National Guard arrived. However, even that wasn't enough, and the discrimination continued. Crosses were burned in community members' yards, both black and white, and the yards were chosen based upon whether the owners of the property supported integration into the school. Now, the violence became so severe that some of the 12 students left the school for good. And even the school's principal's family had to flee the city for safety reasons. The few of the Clinton 12 that remained had to be escorted to and from school each day, and Paul Turner, a white pastor who was one of those people who escorted the group, well, on December 4th, 1956, he was attacked and badly beaten by a white mob. Now, this caused the school to close completely for just a little bit under a week. Then, 2 years after the Clinton 12 first integrated into that high school, and after a period of steady escalation in racial tensions, Clinton High School was bombed and destroyed on October 5th of 1958, using 100 sticks of dynamite in 3 coordinated blasts. No arrests were ever made in the bombing. After fundraising by the local community and very famous Reverend Billy Graham, enough funds were collected to rebuild Clinton High School, and it opened back up in 1960. After the opening of the new school, there were no major reports of incidents of violence and discrimination. That's great, a sign that the community had begun to heal, and also a sign that decency can prevail. Now, with that kind of history, one could hope that a small town of just 10,000 wouldn't allow decency to ever wane again. But it wouldn't be a rise in crime story if that were true. And at the beginning of the 2024 school year in Anderson County, Clinton High School had an average amount of students enrolled. It isn't the biggest high school, but it clearly is not the smallest either. There's roughly about 1,200 students. During that school year, in January, a 17-year-old kid found himself facing a judge in juvenile court. Now, there was nothing too serious in the charges. This kid had a little bit of truancy and some minor theft charges that he was facing. These are things that Judge Brian Hunt probably felt like he could redirect, and he probably felt like he could send the 17-year-old out of his courtroom on a better path. When the judge quizzed the young man about his truancy, well, the teen stiffened his shoulders and declared, "Your Honor, I already graduated from Clinton High School last May." Now, whoa. If he's graduated, how can he be charged with truancy? The prosecutor raised an eyebrow and said to the judge, "That's not true." So what is the judge supposed to do here? Who knows the truth? The judge demanded that the truth be told, and so he called Paula Sellers. She's the director of student services at Clinton High School. Paula told the judge, I'm going to have to hold on just a minute. I'll have to get back to you. She then went to assistant director of schools, Greg Deal. Okay, this is going to be like the assistant superintendent. So Paula tells Greg Deal that Judge Brian Hunt from juvenile court wants an explanation. How is a student saying they have a diploma if Paula has submitted documentation saying the student is currently enrolled? And this is where the pass the buck portion of the about to be unveiled scandal began. Because the assistant director, Greg, well, he told Paula to call the principal, Dan Jenkins. Greg said, tell him to be at the next court date for the 17-year-old, and when he shows up there, he will need to provide an explanation about how these two things can't be true at the same time. Well, Dan, the principal, he passed the baton to assistant principal Nate Martin. Oh, and by the way, the school counselor was also part of the back and forth as well. So if you're keeping count, that's 5 people who can't seem to answer the judge's questions in a quick manner. Now, when the whole thing finally came out in court, it was discovered the 17-year-old was not only still enrolled, he was in the process of failing Algebra 2, English 4, and U.S. history. And that small truancy charge pulled the covers off of the biggest grade tampering scandal in Tennessee public school history, and quite possibly one of the biggest in the U.S. To understand how this happened, you have to understand Edgenuity. That's an online credit recovery platform used by every public school district in the state of Tennessee since 2018. Okay, just picture this. A digital classroom where students can retake failed courses at their own pace. And teachers have a hidden administration panel within that software. With one click, they can switch a student into test-only mode, which means the kid never watches a single lecture, the kid never completes a single assignment, they never even open a textbook. They simply take the final exam. And while taking that final exam, they can Google every answer on their iPhone or their Android, and that will secure them a perfect 100 score. Well, at Clinton High, it is alleged that these potential gaps in the software made it possible for nearly 500 unauthorized changes to be made to students' grades by just one teacher. The truancy case spurred some questions, and authorities started looking into what exactly was going on at the school. 2 months after the judge called the school, the director of secondary education, Susie Schmidt, well, she met with the testing coordinator, Andrea. Again, I listed 5 people before. We've got 2 new ones here. So many administrators who just don't even know what's going on. So this director, Susie, and this testing coordinator, Andrea, they get a hold of Dr. Tim Parrott. He's the director of schools or the superintendent. And Susie broke the news that a number of students at CHS had magically not taken end-of-course exams. Susie was also questioning why so many students were enrolled online. The numbers were higher than expected, and this left lingering questions for Dr. Parrott. So, Dr. Parrott turned to his assistant, okay, remember his name is Greg, and he turned to him and said, start investigating this. Well, when Greg started looking, he learned that one student had, quote, earned 5 credits in just 8 days. And that student was marked as graduated, even though that student only had 26 credits total. Greg went to Dr. Parrott and said, I think we've got a problem. So Dr. Parrott obtained legal counsel. The lawyer told Dr. Parrott to tattle on himself, call the Tennessee Department of Education, and self-report. All of this was just 3 weeks after Greg had started digging. And now the legal counsel was saying, dig deeper. You've got to figure out what's going on here. So Greg and Susie began examining all schedules and transcripts of seniors at Clinton High. What the investigation revealed is that science teacher Rachel Jones allegedly made almost 500 unauthorized changes to kids' grades over the last 2 school years. Her colleague, biology instructor Clay Turpin, allegedly began editing grades in January of 2024. That's the same month the judge discovered the discrepancies. It is alleged Clay continued for the next 4 months, changing grades and moving kids to test-only modes. In just that 4-month span, it is alleged that Clay racked up more than 1,000 alterations to kids' transcripts. Some afternoons, it was shown that Clay had allegedly changed grades for kids over 20 times. It's things like this. Zeros are becoming 100s. Failing grades of a 32 are transformed into passing grades of 70s. One football player's government grade was changed from a 48 to a 98 in the morning. Then, because someone with power felt that wasn't a big enough jump, his grade was changed to 100 by lunchtime, effectively qualifying the player to dress for the football game that night. As the investigation progressed in April, the DA asked that Dr. Parrott and Greg Deal meet with detectives from the county. Those detectives asked for some help in their investigative process. Well, Greg and Dr. Parrott agreed. With the help of Susie, Greg started researching which staff members had been using the Edgenuity software the most. By May 13th, Dr. Parrott presented proposed changes of dismissal for Rachel Jones and Clay Turpin. This was to the Board of Education. That meeting was broadcast live on local cable access. There were parents and students and TV crews there. So it's clearly out front for everyone to see now. And we're going to take down the 2 teachers, right? That's what it seems like. But what about the leadership? Aren't they going to be held accountable? Because at the very top of this pyramid of deceit sat Principal Dan Jenkins, a man who had been named the 2023 Tennessee Principal of the Year by the Tennessee Department of Education. That award also helped Clinton High to be dubbed a, quote, reward school status, which in Tennessee means the graduation rate is above 95%. Well, of course it can be that high if you're allegedly fixing grades. Now, internal emails obtained by the Anderson County Sheriff's Office painted a very chilling picture about what was going on at Clinton High. On March 12, 2024, Principal Jenkins wrote to Rachel Jones the following: "We need this senior cleared for graduation by Friday. Bump the grade, skip the questions, do whatever it takes. Just get him out of here before the state audit." Now, when Rachel Jones wrote an email back, kind of pushing back on the principal in a reply all thread, she was citing ethical concerns. Principal Jenkins stripped her of her admin rights and handed the master password to Clay Turpin with a single line instruction that read, "Handle it." Guidance Department Head Carrie Jenkins, what are we on, like the 8th person now? Okay, Guidance Department Head Carrie Jenkins, and yes, that's the same last name as the principal because yes, she is the principal's wife of 22 years. Well, Carrie Jenkins personally entered 2 of the most egregious changes. One student's F in chemistry became a D- with the stroke of a key, and another sophomore's 48 in world history jumped to a 90 in just under 60 seconds. Those 2 edits alone would later become felony counts. All in all, when the House of Cards collapsed, Dr. Parrott placed Dan Jenkins on administrative leave. Jenkins took the directive and said, "I'm done. I resign." He told administrators he was resigning for family health concerns. On May 21st, 3 veteran guidance counselors received certified letters informing them their contracts would not be renewed for the following year. And Carrie Jenkins, the principal's wife, well, she was suspended without pay and escorted from the building by sheriff's deputies. Head football coach Daryl Keith, who had texted administrators no fewer than 11 times with phrases like, "Need number 74 eligible, change it now." Well, he saw his contract quietly expire on June 30th with no public explanation. And the Tennessee Secondary School Athletic Association, well, they delivered the final blow on May 17th. Every single Clinton Dragons football victory from the 2023 season was forfeited due to the use of an academically ineligible player, basically erasing a playoff run that had been celebrated with downtown parades and front page headlines. Well, it took a year, but in May of 2025, the criminal charges were leveled against staff and administration. On Thursday, May 8th, science teacher Clay Turpin walked into the Anderson County Detention Facility in a Navy blazer, and he surrendered to Sheriff Russell Barker. He faces 24 felony counts of tampering with government records, each count carrying a maximum of 6 years in prison and a $3,000 fine. Now, his bond was set at $100,000. He posted it within 4 hours through a local bail bondsman. 6 days after that, on Wednesday, May 14th, Carrie Jenkins, the principal's wife, turned herself in at the same facility wearing sunglasses and a trench coat. She was booked on 2 felony counts, one for the chemistry grade and one for the history grade, and she was eventually released on a $20,000 bond. So what about Rachel Jones? Well, she cooperated fully with investigators and was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony. She is expected to be the star witness if either case goes to trial. District Attorney Dave Clark told reporters outside the courthouse, "This investigation is ongoing. Additional indictments remain on the table. So we might not be done here." 25 seniors crossed the stage at Clinton High's May 2024 graduation, clutching diplomas that, under new scrutiny, were not fully earned. 6 college acceptance letters were frozen, pending transcript verification. And one University of Tennessee freshman was pulled from summer orientation when admissions discovered 3 core credits had been awarded in Edgenuity in a single afternoon. And unfortunately, the honest graduates, well, they're the ones that have to bear the stigma. Senior class president Emily Carter told WBIR-TV in kind of a tearful sidewalk interview. She said, "Every time I tell someone I'm from Clinton High now, they smirk and ask, 'Hey, did they fix your grades? Up or down?'" Well, by July of 2024, 6 of the affected students returned to campus during summer school, and they completed the missing coursework under direct teacher supervision, and they also exchanged their questionable diplomas for legitimate ones. This all happened in kind of a quiet ceremony attended only by family members. So good things did come out of it. We did get some, justification for what they earned. And 5 more were still enrolled in credit recovery classes when the 2024-2025 school year began in August. Well, in March of 2025, State Senator Ken Yeager, whose district includes Anderson County, he introduced Senate Bill 2381. That bill was quickly nicknamed the Clinton Bill. And for the first time in Tennessee history, the legislation spelled out explicit criminal penalties for unauthorized grade changes in public schools. It would become a Class A misdemeanor for the first offense, escalating to a Class E felony for repeat violations or changes that affect athletic eligibility, college admission, or state funding. That bill sailed through both chambers with bipartisan support and was signed into law by Governor Bill Lee on April 29th of 2025. Meanwhile, Superintendent Tim Parrott held a press conference on the Clinton High football field and vowed this. He said, "We self-reported the moment we discovered the discrepancies. Shared logins are now forbidden. Every grade change is audited in real time. This will never happen on our watch again." Now, before we close out this segment, let's pull the lens back from the rolling hills of East Tennessee and zoom out across the entire United States. Because what happened inside Clinton High was never just a Tennessee story. However, it was the loudest alarm in the nationwide epidemic of diploma desperation. Just 400 miles west, in the summer of 2025, the exact kind of scandal detonated at a Wichita Southeast high school in Kansas. At that school, Principal Claudia Cooper was quietly replaced after auditors discovered, quote, anomalies in Edgenuity platforms. Hundreds of failing grades had been flipped to passing grades in the final 2 weeks of school, so the district could brag about a 5-point graduation rate jump. And retired teachers, well, they blew the whistle. The state legislature opened hearings, and Superintendent Kelly Belafield went on local TV promising, quote, transparent and honest fixes, while parents asked the same question Clinton parents were asking. Which diploma on my kid's wall is real? Then we can head over to Prince George's County in Maryland in 2018. At that school, an outside audit uncovered thousands of last-minute grade changes. Some entered at 2 a.m. So the district was doing this so that they could dodge federal sanctions. Their graduation rates, their grades were so bad, they were about to be sanctioned by the federal government. Now, principals were marched out of that school district, diplomas were retroactively revoked, and the state passed emergency laws kind of mirroring Tennessee's brand new Clinton bill. We can also look back to 2017. This one was in Washington, D.C., where 1 in 3 seniors graduated only because teachers were ordered to award 50% for work never turned in. Basically, what I'm saying here is you didn't even have to do the work and you got a 50. NPR's year-long investigation found identical Edgenuity test-only shortcuts in schools in Los Angeles, schools in Houston, and in Broward County, Florida. There, every district was chasing that same, 90% or 95% graduation trophy, that award that their school was doing so darn good. And you guys, the numbers kind of back this up. The ACT's 2022 study of 4.7 million transcripts showed high school GPAs climbing every single year from 3.17 in 2010 to 3.36 in 2021. That's 2 years of COVID that's included in there. And those numbers don't match because math scores and reading scores, individual testing scores like that, are flatlined. So how are GPAs going up while reading scores and math scores aren't even moving? What's the translation there? Schools are potentially handing out more A's for less learning. So this leaves me asking, when the band is playing pomp and circumstance and you're at graduation ceremonies, are we really celebrating achievement or are we just getting better at cheating? Let me know in the comments. For our next story, we need to travel to Spartanburg County, South Carolina. That's a population of 340,000 people, where the air smells like textile mills and also Southern sweet tea. For 21 years, the loudest voice on the police scanner belonged to Sheriff Charles David Wright. He goes by Chuck Wright. He's a 6'3", Stetson hat wearing, Bible verse on the business card carrying, protect and serve man who has a mouth that once told a room full of reporters, quote, "If you come here to hurt us, I'm going to shoot you in the face." Voters love this guy. For the most part, they ate it up. Clearly because the man served 6 terms as sheriff, earning about $200,000 a year, plus a $15,000 state stipend. But then, on May 23rd of this year, Chuck Wright abruptly walked into the sheriff's office at 8:02 a.m. He handed over his badge and he vacated his position. The resignation was just 3 days after the sheriff had returned from a 30-day court-ordered rehab stint. 3 days after that resignation, the feds were knocking at his door. And by October 30th, that happened just a few days ago, the sheriff was standing in federal court in Greenville, voice cracking, reading a prepared apology that goes like this. "I pleaded guilty because I am guilty." So what's the sheriff that was so popular with the people guilty of? Well, stealing your money. 1 Chick-fil-A sandwich, 1 pack of Marlboros, 1 iPad at a time. Here's how it works in Spartanburg. Most elected officials get a county Visa credit card. Sheriff Chuck's card was red. But according to the sheriff, this whole red card created a problem for him because his personal bank card was red also. And the color mix-up was his excuse for why he was using the county card to buy his personal wants and needs. But this excuse has some issues because the color mix-up has been going on for 7 years. 7 years of grabbing the wrong card out of his wallet, allegedly. Now, the South Carolina Ethics Commission didn't buy Sheriff Chuck's excuse, and on October 1st of 2025, they dropped a 19-page bomb filled with 63 felony ethics counts, 1 for every time Chuck swiped the wrong plastic. The total damage was $17,058.42. You guys, that's enough money to buy every deputy a new ballistic vest or buy Chuck 92 packs of cigarettes from Dollar General, 147 opioid pills from his own evidence drop box, and a trail camera to watch deer. All of this while taxpayers watch their money paid to the county, poof, just disappear. Now let me share some more of Sheriff Chuck's purchases. At Best Buy, he spent $946. He bought an iPad for his grandkids, among other things. At the Apple App Store, he spent $1,350. He was buying things like credits on Royal Match, Ramp Car Jumping, and Candy Crush. At SiriusXM, he spent $1,586 because I guess every traffic stop he's involved in needs to have some classic rock. And then at Fuddruckers, he spent $871. Those must be some really yummy cheeseburgers. At Academy Sports, he spent $236. He bought backpacks, cordage, and a trail cam. And then there's CNC ammunition, $1,017. That was for range time and hearing protection, all of this for his personal guns, not for county training. And then we've got Longhorn Steakhouse, Olive Garden, Chick-fil-A. It looks like date nights were on the government dime with these purchases. At Amazon Prime, he spent $139 a year. That was renewing automatically for his Prime membership. And finally, PureFlix. That's where he got Christian movies because I guess nothing says Christian values like binge watching on the county credit card. Now, the report found so much more than just these expenses that I listed. Chuck's friend, Chaplain Amos Durham, well, he also got in trouble based upon this report. Amos and Chuck were alleged to be skimming money from the sheriff's benevolence fund. Okay, this was money specifically donated to help law enforcement when, like personal needs arise. Maybe there's health concerns within a family or a tragic accident with one of the officers or some of the employees. But instead, Amos and Chuck, for 7 years, siphoned $89,000 from that fund. With that money, they bought prescription meds illegally, but they coded it as a DC trip to honor a fallen soldier. This amongst other questionable purchases. Am I done with this? No, you guys, because we also have the 2 charges of nepotism. See, back in July of 2024, fresh off of his win in his sheriff's race, Chuck swore his own son, named Andy, in as a deputy. He celebrated the coronation with a Facebook post that read, "Like father, like son." And when Andy misbehaved, Chuck looked the other way. Also, with the nepotism issue was a man named Lawson Barry Watson, or LB is what he goes by. See, LB is Chuck's cousin by marriage. And LB was conveniently hired as a community liaison, which earned him a salary of $200,000 over a 4-year span. But here's the deal. LB didn't even have a job duty. He didn't show up for anything. He just earned that paycheck. Well, in the courtroom last week, all 3 men, Sheriff Chuck, Chaplain Amos, and Community Liaison LB, well, they pled guilty on all of their charges. Now, prior to the guilty pleas, Sheriff Chuck's colleagues were backing him. This was a year ago. They were saying, no, Sheriff Chuck's a good dude. And initially, Councilman Manier Abusaft said he didn't even know the sheriff had a credit card, but he said he felt the sheriff wouldn't do anything dishonest. And then another councilman, David Britt, said he had faith in the sheriff, explaining that he believed there was a valid reason that the sheriff made the purchases. He reasoned that the sheriff could be listening to podcasts on leadership, and that's why there were charges at Apple. He also said the food purchases could have been for stakeouts. Well, last week, the sheriff was blunt, speaking in court saying the following: "I squandered a dream job through my actions, and for that I simply ask that the people of Spartanburg and my brother and sisters in law enforcement forgive me." Well, following his guilty plea, Chuck is now on house arrest awaiting sentencing in February of next year. He could spend 20 years behind bars with the guilty plea on the charges. And like the first story, this isn't the only time that kind of behavior has occurred. In Darlington County, also in South Carolina, the sheriff there bought a $70,000 Tahoe with drug seizure cash. That's right, cash they recovered from drug dealers. He then used that Tahoe to drive his family to a vacation in Florida. And speaking of Florida, a sheriff there in 2024 used county funds to purchase skybox suites. He was claiming those suites would boost morale amongst him and his employees. And then in 2022 in Louisiana, a sheriff there had a secret slush fund, which he used to pay for his daughter's wedding. Now, the U.S. Treasury is reporting that sheriffs nationwide misspent $114 million in 2024 alone. Most of that money misused from federal grants. So the federal government is giving money and saying, hey, here's extra money. Please use it for this program, or please give it to the homeless, or please help with training, or whatever the grant is meant for. And the sheriffs use it for something else. Okay, this makes you want to ask a whole bunch of questions, huh? Just let me know what you think in the comments about Sheriff Chuck and the misuse of funds basically across the United States, at least according to that report. And finally today, for 4 bright years, Angeline, or Angie Mock, was the smiling voice that woke up St. Louis, working for affiliate Fox 2 as the morning anchor from 2011 to 2015. Now, we all know the type, the Katie Couric or the Savannah Guthrie type. The anchor who laughed through live shots. She nailed that weather toss, where she says, now to you, Jim, for a weather update. And Angie, well, she used to sign off each broadcast with the phrase, have a great day, everyone. Angie was well liked. Viewers sent her Christmas cards. Stations in Oklahoma City and Nebraska still run her old reels for news packages when needed. But as the system works, the cameras eventually stopped rolling, and Angie faded from airwaves, transitioning into sales cubicles at these stations. That was all in 2015. Let's fast forward to Halloween morning of 2025. At 7:52 a.m., a quiet cul-de-sac in South Wichita erupted with a blood-soaked woman sprinting barefoot across the street, palms sliced open. She was screaming for a phone from anyone who would listen. The bloody woman, still wearing her same blonde anchor hair, well, that was 47-year-old Angie Mock. And she was frantically begging a teenage neighbor to dial 911 because she gasped, I just stabbed my mother to save myself. When officers arrived to the home, which is a tidy ranch house on a quiet street, they found 80-year-old Anita Avers exactly where she seemed to have fallen asleep. All of that, presumably, the night before. Snuggled under a floral quilt, Anita seemed serene, except her chest was barely rising and falling in shallow breaths because a kitchen knife was buried in her ribs. Paramedics reported what they felt were 11 different stab wounds to the body. Just over a half an hour after the 911 call, Anita died at St. Francis Hospital. In the same ER, Angie was having the wounds on her hands bandaged. Inside her room stood law enforcement, a chaplain, and of course the nurse rendering aid. And Angie allegedly told all of them over and over again that her mother was, quote, coming at her. Herein lies the problem. If Anita was coming at Angie, where's the weapon? Why is she snuggled under an Afghan? Well, by noon that day, Angie was grieving the loss of her mother while being read her Miranda rights, charged with first-degree murder. Eventually, her bond was set at $1 million. Her old Fox 2 employees, well, they went live with the story, but they didn't know exactly how to express what was being relayed to them. Their old colleague was being called a murderer. And according to Newsweek, no motive has been disclosed, but it is being reported that Angie allegedly whispered to her public defender that, quote, Mom said she was ready to die, so I helped her get there. Now, I'll be watching this one for you and let you know as more information becomes available. We are very, very early on in this story. And now to comments from Monday's episode, referencing the NBA and mafia gambling scandal. Sean said his mom worked for the Gambino family and that they were lovely and kind. I would expect that to be true. Mafia families are famously loyal, and if Sean's mother was good to them, I would totally imagine they were good to her. Karen weighed in and said that while she watches sporting events, she frequently believes they are rigged contests. And Amy basically seconded that thought. And then one listener corrected me on the pronunciation of the Italian crime family. It's not Lucanese, it's Lucchese. Noted, and I'm probably going to be talking about them again, so thank you for letting me know. And then finally, a comment on Spotify. Somebody they had issue with my idea that the unnamed player in the indictment could be LeBron James. Well, that wasn't me who said that. That was ESPN. So if you've got a problem with that, take it up with ESPN. I was quoting the news article of what I think we would consider the sports experts when reporting on sports. All right, that's your Thursday episode of Rise in Crime. Thank you for being here. Please share this episode with a friend. That's a great way to let the podcast grow. I also am so grateful for these case suggestions. Like I said, Kirsten sent in our first case today. That was fun to dive into something that I haven't seen a lot of people cover. So thank you for sending that in, Kirsten. And please like, follow, subscribe, share if you can, comment. That also helps the podcast get traction. Do all of those for all 3 Oh No Media podcasts. That's Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and Rise in Crime. And thank you for always letting me ask you to do those things. I really appreciate it. Join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.